Welcome back to A Little Loud Labs with another crazy and fun FlisKits build. Today we'll be building the Decim8. It's a relatively long process, so patience is definitely required on this one. We'll also be sort of fabricating a few of the parts from sheets and other parts ourselves here. So just make sure to read all the instructions a couple times and dry fit everything a few times as well. All right, let's get to it. We start by marking a circle on a ping pong ball that'll sort of serve as our engine core and give a nice, interesting profile to our space fighter here. And then we'll cut that out, and then we'll cut the jig and align that to the hole that we cut out to match the body tube, and then mark the rest of the fittings. We'll also put a launch lug in through here, so we're going to go ahead and mark all of that now. Now, as we cut this, one note is I did cut these circles with the seam in the ping pong ball running straight through the circle. The seam did kind of want to run, and the change in the consistency of the ping pong ball made it a little harder to get a regular circle there. So we go back and we can trim it up a little bit and sand it down. But if I was to do it again, I would probably avoid that seam and just let it run sort of equatorially between the holes there. Next, we'll take the body tube template and mark what's a pretty large amount of lines. It's important to get those marked and labeled as you go through this assembly process. Make sure they're nice and dark, or you'll have to go back and remap them to the template. It's pretty critical to the rest of the build to keep track of those. Next, we're going to install the engine block. So we're going to go ahead and measure an engine for the right depth there, put some glue on a centering ring, and go ahead and put that in, and then cut the spot for the engine hook. Go ahead and apply masking tape just to keep that in place. After that, we're going to measure out and then mount the fore and aft centering rings for this engine tube here. We're going to cut a little slit so that there's some play and movement in the engine hook so we can get the motors in and out. Then we'll just go ahead and glue those in place. The next thing to do would be to take our newly finished engine mount and go ahead and put that in the first section of body tube. And of course, come back and apply some fillets of glue. Then we cut out and apply the larger body tube template here. These are very critical to the rest of the build, so make sure to make nice straight dark lines and label which one each is for. You also need to make sure that these line up with the marks we made with the last template on the motor mount. With that done, we'll cut out the template for cutting the body tube to give the jagged joining between the two disparate sections of body tube there. We'll mark that, and then we'll go around and cut that out. Then once we get that cut out, we'll sand it and apply some centering rings. Now, since we're going to have two sections of body tube that are going to be offset for each other, to join those we have these sort of 3/4 moon, almost baffles. What that's going to do is seal off to the outside, but allow ejection gases to pass in the overlapping section of the body tube so that we can ensure that we do get a nice safe deployment. And as those are drying, we're going to go ahead and cut the next section of body tube. We're going to use one of the couplers there just to give us a little extra stiffness, keep that line clean. Once we get that, we'll of course sand the burr off and make sure we have a nice clean edge. Then we'll trim off what we don't need of the centering rings just to the shape of that 3/4 baffle. And then in one of them, we're going to go ahead and drill a hole in to pass the shock cord through. After we get the shock cord through, we'll go ahead and mount these rings to the outsides of the body tubes there. I just use some CA glue to tack them in place. And then we'll come back once that's set with some more fillets of wood glue. Once those are nice and set, we're going to go back in and just cut some slits so that we can slide these tubes together and have the mate. We'll pass that shock cord through to get it out of the way, and then we'll slide them together and let them glue in place there. Now, one thing here is that I didn't get super clean lines, and I feel like it was slightly off axis, so I check to make sure that they're straight with each other. And I need some tension applied to keep them nice and straight with each other, so I put some tape on there. The other thing is there was a little bit of a gap, so I go back in and I apply a paper patch between some layers of wood glue just to shore that up and seal it off. Then what we do is we cut out the templates and then the balsa wood pieces to close off the open ends of the body tubes. And then we'll glue those in place. We cut them a little large so that we can sand them down and shape them in situ there, just to make sure we have nice tight fits. And that of course means we do take a couple iterations here with the sandpaper, just sanding them down slowly so we don't overshoot it. Once we're satisfied with the fit, we'll go ahead and glue those in place and just hold them there with a little bit of masking tape because it is at somewhat of a funny angle. Then we'll glue on the engine core ping pong ball here, and we'll start to put the launch lug in. Now I noticed I don't think it's quite parallel with the body tube, so we're going to go ahead and trim up some of those holes there and make sure that that's nice and straight. Then with the closures dried, we'll come back and we'll sand those smooth. Now that we have what I think is a more straight alignment of the launch lug, we'll go ahead and apply the top launch lug using a piece of launch rod there. And just for aesthetics and symmetry, there's another forward launch lug that's applied that's not actually used. Once those are somewhat dry in place there, we'll come back and we'll apply some fillets of glue, and then we'll go back and we'll trim flush the bottom launch lug. Then we'll take out these sort of spokes or spurs here and sand them down and apply them across the engine core here, aligning with the marks we made earlier. It is relatively important to get these all lined up so that the final sort of tube fin almost on the bottom is straight with the axis of the rocket. And then we'll glue that in place here. Next, we're going to move to cutting out the main sort of wing fins that are going to go around that engine core. We're going to go ahead and cut those out, and then we'll sand them flush and make sure they're nice and symmetric with each other. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and tack them in with some super glue on each side here. We'll of course come back later and apply more wood glue to that and make sure they're nice and secure. The overall fin design does create a pretty decent lever arm on the tips of the fins, so we do want to make sure that those are nice and secure. Next, we're going to cut the tube fin sections out that are going to hold those nacelles and then join the outer wings on the back fins here. We're going to cut those out of some sections of body tube. Then we're going to line those up, cut some slits to mate them together, and then we'll apply some wood glue and glue those in place there. Since these will be structural members, as the X-wings will be glued to the outside and the main wings on the inside, I did want to go back and apply even more glue. So I got a skewer to make sure that we had some internal fillets there as well, just to try and get as much strength as possible. Now we're going to move on to assembling these nacelles. We just take the balsa wood nose cones and glue them in place there into the small sections of small body tube. And then go back around and apply another fillet of glue with just a balsa wood scrap here, just again to make sure that that's nice and structural. Then with that in place, we're going to sand those down, get them nice and smooth. Then we'll apply some glue to the nacelles, and we'll glue the nacelles in place. They did want a sort of clamshell open in the front, so I went ahead and applied tape to vise those down. Once those are dry, we're going to come back and glue those onto the main wing sections here. Then we're going to come back and we're going to cut out the rest of the fins. There's 3 fins remaining on each side, the 2 that I've been calling sort of the X-wing, and then a continuation, visually anyway, of the straight wing section. As we get those cut out, we're of course going to put them together and sand them, make sure that they're all nice and symmetric. And the other thing here is we're going to have to put a chamfered angle on those X-wings so that they'll glue together and be secure and fit into the sort of nacelle holding tube fin. We're also going to have to put a double chamfer on the straight edge section just to make sure that it can mate well with the X-wings and get nice, good, solid contact for gluing. Another piece of visual interest on these fins is there's bamboo skewers that you'll cut down to shape to put on the outside and match the sort of ongoing angles of the fin. You could paint those to sort of be guns or any one of a number of things, or just little small nacelles themselves. But we'll go ahead and cut those out, get the angles aligned, and get them nice and securely glued onto those fin segments there. Next, what we're going to do is use CA glue to tack together each of those winglets there, and then come back behind it and apply some nice fillets of wood glue for structural integrity there. Then we'll cut out the final straight piece to go in the middle of those winglets. Then we'll sand that beveled edge down there so it'll fit into the angle that is those 2 winglets. And we'll glue that in place. And of course, follow that up with some fillets of glue using a skewer to help us get it to the nooks and crannies. The straight portions have another sort of interesting visual effect. They use toothpicks on little sections of small launch lugs to definitely be sort of suggestive of small nacelles or, again, some sort of gun, depending on how you want to paint it. So we'll glue those in place, and then we'll glue the whole sort of sub-assembly of these winglets onto each side, being extra careful to make sure that they line up with the plane and the axis of the overall rocket. This took a little bit of time to make sure that we were lined up and to get them nice and secure, but overall it wasn't too terribly bad. Once they're tacked in place there, we'll of course follow up with this little scrap of balsa wood, just applying fillets of glue to everywhere we see. The next aesthetic piece that we make is we take the cut section of ping pong ball and we make that sort of the satellite dish reflector, and we make a radome out of some paper there to form a cone, and we glue those together. Those mount to the end of a small section of body tube or launch lug, more like of this diameter, and we're going to mount that to another spur that we're going to cut out of balsa wood and put just in front of the sort of engine core on the main body tube of the rocket. So we glue our shrouded parabolic collector on the end of this tube here, let that set. Then we'll glue the spur onto the main body tube here at the alignment marks where we did earlier, and then we'll put that tube in radome on the spur and go ahead and apply some more fillets of glue. Then we'll glue that in place, and then we'll cut out two additional sections of little fins that'll sort of counterbalance that radome on the opposite side, probably just to balance out that drag coefficient there. Then we'll sand those smooth and symmetric and glue them to the underside of the rocket. With those in place, it's onto the recovery system. We're going to start by putting the eye bolt into the nose cone here with a little bit of wood glue. Then we're going to prepare the parachute with some reinforcement rings and tie those lines to it. Make sure that they're the right length, and then we're going to attach them to a swivel. Then once that's in place, we're going to go back and just put a little dab of glue on the knots just to make sure they stay secure, and then tie the Kevlar portion of the shock cord to the elastic portion, tie that to the nose cone, and then put the parachute on the eye bolt to the nose cone. Doing the final assembly felt a little snug, so we're going to sand down the shoulder there. Once we're happy with that, we're going to do a quick check of our thrust to weight and head over to our art department for a lightning fast paint job. We'll start with some streaks of lightning, then they're going to add some tracing around the outside, and go back and add whites to some highlights, then some accents in red. And just like that, with some film magic, it's ready to take flight. Thank you, Art Department.
One.
Okay, this is our last bucket. This is our last bucket.
Very nice.
I think the wadding. Where's the wadding? It didn't go very
And
far.
that is it is calm now. Very nice.
Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe.